The revolution is sort of continuing at Reading. It's plodding along. That's the best way I can think of putting it. Welcome to the Tilehurst podcast, episode 159 with your host Marc, as per usual. And joining me this week to talk about a 1-0 defeat at Fulham and a 2-2 draw at Sunderland. Games that, let's face it, could have gone a lot worse. It's Dave Handbags Harris. Well, how's it going, mate?
Not too bad. You all right?
Yeah, I'm decent. I went down to Fulham. All the predictions, we'll talk about the prediction league later, but all the predictions for Fulham were that we were going to get absolutely hammered. 1-0 defeat, played relatively well. I'm just about okay with it.
Yeah, likewise. We'd have done well to get anything from there. They're on such a run of form, and they hyped it up big time. It was one of their well, obviously being the time of year as well as what happened last season. They were always going to be up for it, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fans, just by about the 88th minute when Aston Villa scored, the Fulham fans got involved in that. So we'll be talking about that in just a bit of time. I'll have just a couple of news updates to get on the show. Hunty's walk to Fulham, of course, happened, and you can still donate. He beat his target of, I think it's €3,000 he was hoping to beat for Calm, the campaign against living miserably, the charity that Hunty was going for with his walk to Fulham. You can still, of course, donate to that. I'll be sticking a link up to that on the website. And there will be no official main show podcast next week. I will be off gallivanting in Madrid at the same time as Reading playing Sheffield Wednesday, so I won't be around to record it. Ollie, who does the podcast extra, the door is open to him, the week is open to him whenever he wants to put that up, so hopefully you'll have some more information on that in the meantime. And I guess that means we'll crack on with this episode 159 then, and in the recap we'll be talking about Fulham and Sunderland.
View from the Tilehurst end, recapping this week's championship action.
As I say, 1-0 at Fulham, 2-2 versus Sunderland at the Madejski. Well, Dave, this was really quite annoying one, this Sunderland game, wasn't it? This was a game that we were going into, 2 home wins on the bounce, both 1-0. I kind of thought, Sunderland are probably going to score. We can't just keep keeping clean sheets at home. Something's got to give. Go 1-0 up with a penalty, and then just nothing after that. Nothing that we build on. Nothing that we kept going and grew a momentum sense behind us. Went 2-1 down and, pulled it back. Could have won it in the end. Bit of a topsy-turvy game.
Yeah, one of those games that you look back and you think, yeah, that was fairly enjoyable. When apart from the last 10 minutes, not a huge amount happened other than the goals. There wasn't any niggle in the game. There wasn't really any particularly nasty challenges or fouls or anything like that. There's nothing really to get either side worked up. Penalty was a penalty. Equaliser was an absolute stunning effort from, it must be between 30 and 35 yards. Disappointing to concede from a set piece, particularly to I was going to say the shortest man on the pitch, but perhaps the second shortest man on the pitch. And then Jan Kermigan, his aerial prowess comes to the fore again, doesn't it? It's frustrating, but Sunderland, for their position, they're no mugs. They've still got decent quality, particularly in attack. I mean, for God's sake, Aidan McGeady is easily, far and away, one of the I'd say I'll put him up there with amongst the best wide players in the Championship. Certainly for his, he's played at some good clubs, some big clubs in Europe, in good leagues. We're not talking about Celtic. He's played in the Premier League. He's played the Russian Premier Division. He's played at some very, very good clubs. So what on earth he's doing in a Championship relegation battle is anybody's guess. They've got some decent battling quality, and it showed, and it showed itself before. What did they do? Was it 4-0, 4-1 at Derby? They had 3-3 at Bristol City, coming back from 3-0 down. They had the same, I think, or similar against Middlesbrough at the Stadium of Light, was it? So they're a side that have got resilience. They just can't defend. The biggest worry for me was our lack of ability to really hurt them at set pieces, given that we knew, and everybody knows, that Sunderland can't defend set pieces. So, and the general sort of feeling was it was almost I want to call it almost a non-entity match in some ways, like two sides that had nothing really to play for, given it was one of the biggest games at this stage of the season that we'll have. So, in many ways it was a bit disappointing, but at the same time, in the end, it would have been good to have won it, but at least we haven't lost it.
Yeah, a true end of season feel. I think that might have been because of the weather. It was such a nice day on Saturday. All the players probably strolled out and thought, "Oh, it's a pre-season friendly. This doesn't have any kind of relegation Titanic battle." It's interesting what you say about Sunderland with their away form. They've only lost 9 games away from home all season. That's one more than Villa, one more than Middlesbrough. It's the same as Brentford. All good teams in the top half of the table. But they have, as you say, also the 39 goals they've now conceded on the road in the division. Only Birmingham have conceded more than that. So Sunderland are a bit of a hit and miss team, and we got them on probably one of their better days. What I would say is that in terms of our style, we've kind of receded back into our play at the start of the season. We're defensively generally quite solid, attacking, nothing really going on, certainly for large portions of the game. And, at the start of the season, we certainly weren't in relegation form, and that might just be enough to pull us over the line now.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right in that. Certainly the fundamental difference between Clement and Stam is that before we tended to try to do stuff with the ball. Now we're trying to do stuff without the ball. I don't think, am I right in saying that we've not actually won a possession battle so far under Clement? So there's a fundamental difference. We do kind of recede, we drop off, we allow teams space to not necessarily to play, but certainly we don't allow them, or try not to allow them, to get too close to our final third. We don't pressure particularly highly. I can see if it doesn't work, it's clearly garnering some results now at the moment. But if it continues to be so regressive and the results drop off, then I can see some people, certainly many people, will quickly grow tired of it if it doesn't work. That's my concern. That was my concern when we took him on, is that he perhaps had the tools to be able to continue in a similar manner to where Jaap Stam left off and build from. But at the same time was the fact that we don't, his teams, both at Derby and at Swansea, they don't score hatfuls of goals. They didn't score hatfuls of goals, and they were generally perceived to be fairly regressive.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the thing that I said about Stam when he left was there was never a sense of progress, and we never were better one week than the last week, and certainly no discernible sort of upwards trajectory. That is the thing you can say about Clement as well. I think generally speaking, we kind of been very consistent. Obviously, we had the old game at Villa and whatnot, which really dropped off, but kind of been very consistent in our play. And one of the massive things that's come out to me was 22 shots to Sunderland on Saturday, 12 for Reading. Under Paul Clement, since he took over, Reading have had 28 shots on goal. I mean, 12 of those came against Sunderland, so you can see how few we've had in some of the other games. The amount of shots on goal that our opposition has had since Paul Clement took over is 108. Now that is a substantial amount more shots on goal that we're conceding than we're getting in. And yet, I mean, the aggregate of the amount of points we're coming out with it, the aggregate of scores, isn't so bad. And that's not something that I feel is sustainable.
I'd like to see where the majority of those shots... It's always that age-old question, isn't it? When you look at shots on goal, A, how many were on target, and B, where were the shots from? Yeah, so it's a question of where those... yeah, all right, I know where I'm going with this. So it's a question of either, how you actually set up, and if you're allowing whether shots are actually getting through on goal, and where those shots are actually getting through on goal from, and if they're taking shots from shall we say less likely areas to score, then you've got to say there's something kind of right. But if those shots are continually turning out to be on target, eventually you're going to get an absolute worldie that's going to end up flying into the net. Now we've conceded. We obviously conceded the penalty against QPR, didn't concede the goal. But we conceded 3 against Villa, we conceded 1 against Fulham, we've now conceded 2 against Sunderland. So you can't turn around and say that defensively we are necessarily that much better. Yes, we've had 2 clean sheets, but I genuinely do have my reservations over the way things are going. and where they're likely to end up, based on what I've seen, what I've heard.
Yeah, I think the thing is with we say where we're ending up. I like to think that this is all temporary. I like to think that Clement has come in with a temporary solution to sort out what is, in my opinion, a pretty threadbare squad when it comes to game-winning quality, and he's kind of just got back to basics. That's what I'm telling myself at the moment, to be comfortable with it. Clement is still unbeaten at home. Of course, it's worth saying. He said after the game there was some brilliant defending of the penalty area, but it wasn't compact enough, not positionally disciplined enough either. Things we've got to get right in the last 3 games. We've got to play smarter. We've got to make sure we have more control in the last 3 games. Yes, we're going to try and win the games, but in a slightly different way.
You can't argue with that at all, really, can you? I mean, it's exactly what I saw on Saturday. Admittedly, Saturday was the first of Clement's football that I've actually seen. I've missed the first 2 home games, I haven't been able to get to either Fulham or Villa. Perils of being a civil servant at the end of the financial year. So, it was the first that I'd seen. I was intrigued. I wasn't overly enthused, but at least, what we did display was battling quality that I hadn't seen for months under Jaap Stam. There was a willingness to actually get back into that game, and there's also a level of intensity that was also missing under Stam, which is quite pleasing. And I'm with you in many ways. I hope this is the way that we're playing is sort of temporarily a short-term fix with a view to a longer-term review, shall we say, an alternative style of play. Based on what we know of what he did at Derby and Swansea, though, I'm not entirely convinced it's necessarily going to happen. But we'll see.
So what do we need then to stay up? We've got 5 points gap between ourselves and Barnsley. Barnsley still have a game in hand. Then it's 3 to play, all very simple, with Bolton and Birmingham both 3 points behind us. Burton a little bit further back, 8 points behind us.
Who's Barnsley's game in hand against?
Forest away.
Forest away, right. So it's not exactly easy, but it's winnable. You've got to say it's winnable.
Oh, yeah.
What do we need to stay up? I think we need 1 win. 1 win. We remain unbeaten in 2 of the 3 games that we've got remaining. I think we'll be okay. Hopefully that'll be one of the wins will come at Sheffield Wednesday or at home to Ipswich, and then we go to Cardiff with the with the nice feeling of we're safe. We'll see what happens, but I can see us beating Ipswich. I can't see things going as badly as our last trip to Hillsborough. But then they've still got, great quality, certainly up front. In Jordan Rhodes, Newhugh seems to have been a bit of a revelation this second half of the season, for example. So they've got good quality. That's going to be tough up there. But if we get the win that we need, I think we need against Ipswich, then I think we'll be okay.
I've earmarked 4 points will guarantee us safety. 2 points on 3 points should really be enough, and even 1. I mean, it depends. You've got to have not only 1 team has got to overtake us. We've got to have 3 teams overtake us, and the form Bolton won. They've lost 4 their last 5, drawing the other. Birmingham lost their last 2. So
yeah, and I think that a key indicator of just where we are is my cash out on my Judas bet to get Reading to be relegated, which was laid back in February. I hasten to add, while Jaap Stam was still in charge. And no sign of him being sacked. My cash out value is now 20p, whereas 6 weeks ago it was just over a £5 for my £5 stake. I would have been in profit at that point in time. So there's a fair indication. #GambleAware.
Yeah, that is one to watch. We don't really do Bookie Watch these days, but that's maybe at the start of next season we should lay on loads of bets for every possible scenario and then work out what the cash out is, just to really work out how likely things are. But as you say, #GambleAware. Maybe that's one for someone with deeper pockets than I have. One last thing I want to talk about in terms of the team specifically. You've obviously seen Dave Edwards. His role has changed. I wonder what you make of it against Sunderland. I think he's playing a lot higher up now, playing more off the striker. Maybe with Swift and Kelly playing alongside him against Sunderland, it was a bit different. He's coming for a lot of criticism while he's been playing this higher role, and I think it's, when a player gets sent off after 30 minutes, that's inevitable. But a lot of the sense that I'm getting with him is that it didn't suit him the way he was playing under Stam. It needed a change, and if anything's going to work, I think this is probably the thing that would make sense for him.
Yeah, it's hard with Edwards because there's no. I've always considered, and the Wolves always considered him much more of a. I want to say he's almost Steve Sidwell type with a little bit less energy. So he's a bit sort of box to box. Making late runs in, he scored a number of goals last season for Wolves, didn't he? Making those late runs that he made a name for himself with, and we haven't really seen that from him this season too much. Yapstam, I think, tried to play him in a similar way, playing him further forward off the striker. I'm not convinced it's going to work. I think that is John Swift's prime position, and it was interesting watching Swift on Saturday playing so deep. He's able to influence play. From deep. But, I remember a number of instances where managers and coaches have tried to do that with their most creative players and have them playing deep. And it hasn't really worked. I'd much rather see John Swift further up the pitch and Dave Edwards playing a much more sort of combative break-up role, alongside, playing the sort of the little tiny layoffs that a much maligned ex-Reading player used to do, and Keith Jones. Keith Jones was excellent at breaking up play and laying it off simple, and he was very maligned when he was with us. And I'd like to see Edwards playing that kind of role rather than the more sort of box to box that he seemed to play on Saturday.
Yeah, one thing. Let's move on then and talk about the crowd that was at the Malaysia Stadium. It's 17,500 crowd for the Sunderland game. Not that many Sunderland away fans, which I felt was quite decent. Firstly, the crowds have increased since Stam left. Do you think that is down to Clement and the way that he's sort of, the style that he's implemented? Because I would say that a lot of the fans that were sat around me for the QPR game in particular were quite clearly there because Stam wasn't.
That's more it. It's not so much that it's Paul Clement that's brought them back. It's more the fact that Stam has now gone, and the perception is that perhaps we're going to be a bit more exciting to watch. People, long and short of it is, people were bored. People were bored of the football. Even last season we finished third, and we what did we win? 26 games. You can't turn around and say that many of those games were particularly invigorating. So people were bored of the style, and soon if people are bored when you're winning, but accepting of the fact that you're winning, what's going to happen? It's inevitable what's going to happen when you start losing. Of course, we started losing. People were undoubtedly going to end up deserting, leaving in their droves, and they just bore fruit as soon as we started losing on a regular basis. So it's good that the crowd are back. I'd like to see them be a little bit more engaged. Also, certainly against QPR, by all accounts, they were. And the couple of little movements that we've got going. I say a couple. The movement that we've got going will hopefully help that.
Yeah, we had a chat with me and Simeon, spoke about it last time on the show because we had it from the first game that it was open for the Preston game. There's about 30 fans, I think, were in the South Stand there. 30 to 40. I still don't know if there's a name for it yet. If there's if it's officially the South Bank or whatever. That's still
no. It won't be the South Bank. We think. I say we. It was never officially that anyway. It was the whole idea was.
That was kind of coincidence, the South, because it was in the South Stand. That was more coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. I know one person mentioned the South Bank. Don't know whether it was by accident or not, but it's certainly not a design to call it the South Bank. I think it, and even then, simply because it's still only very much a trial basis. It could move next season. So, it depends on exactly what happens. It's not necessarily going to stay in the South Stand. So.
Yeah. So what is the next thing on? Because I know yourself was kind of involved with the idea that you were in it on for the Sunderland game when it was obviously it was built up a little bit more. There were a few more fans, and I think maybe about 100 or 150 or so. What is the next step then?
So the next step. We have a review meeting on Wednesday with the club. I'll be travelling down to that to discuss it, exactly where we go from here. Ipswich, I think I can quite happily, although nothing's actually been confirmed yet, I can quite happily go on record and say that it will be it will be happening again for the Ipswich game. And there will probably be another target. I mean, the target when we first set out was, the club said, there were half a dozen of us in the focus group meeting in the middle of February. So again, you've got to remember, this is when Stan was in charge. Atmosphere and attendances were effectively an all-time championship low. So the atmosphere was appallingly negative, and there were half a dozen of us in there who just thought, do you know what, sod this. We're just going to chant. All we want to do is just get together and chant. What can the club do to help us? Adam Benson, commercial director, said, right, if you can get 50 people together, then we'll basically open the South Stand for you and accommodate you there, so you can get a little bit of a movement going. Because we also felt that there were a lot of people around the stadium, dotted around, who wanted to be more engaged, but didn't necessarily feel able to. This wasn't through any kind of research or anything. It was just a gut feeling that we had. And it's literally a case of, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to see what happens. So, and these people, we felt that they wanted to be more engaged. They didn't feel they could be, because they wouldn't necessarily have the vocal backing of the people around them. So we've decided that we're just going to hopefully give them somewhere where they can come and they can actually, get positively behind and not really necessarily worry about the away supporters and whatnot. So the next step, as I say, Ipswich, once we've had the review meeting, we'll probably have undoubtedly the club will set us a target. If you can meet so many people, then we'll open it again. I would imagine it'll be somewhere between 250 and 500. The positivity we've received, we think, or I certainly think we could get that. And gradually, next season we'll see what happens. There will be another review meeting probably after Ipswich to discuss the next steps to hopefully bring it into a more permanent fruition. There is a Twitter group which has been set up in the last few days. Club 1871 is just what it's been called. Nobody's really said that that's necessarily going to be the name. It just seemed to be something to identify ourselves with. It's run by or sort of administered by the chap Joe Stevenson, who's one of the main protagonists. I can't ever claim to be one of the main protagonists, mainly because I wasn't there for the Preston game. But certainly I'm doing my bit to assist. I'll be talking hopefully to Cowshed Loyal in the coming days to see where Huddersfield so where they started from, what they've done to build their end, which again is very similar to what we've got at the moment, shall we say. It's right next to the away fans, and it's been multiple years going now. So admittedly, yeah, we know ultimately it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. We're not trying to force people to come over to us if they don't want to. That's absolutely fair enough. Everybody has the right to support Reading Football Club as they see fit. But if you want to sing and chant and basically get behind, the 11 players on the pitch, 14 players involved and whatnot, then certainly give us a bit of consideration. We're all long-term, I say long-term Reading fans. There's a lot of youthful faces in there with untapped enthusiasm, shall we say. But as far as I'm aware, nobody's not been supporting the club for less than sort of 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And certainly some of us longer, like me, 29 years, and Paula Martin in there says that she can remember Elm Park pre-segregation. So, bless her. So, but Paula Martin's in there. We had Valdemar Janaszak in there, who's a long-term supporter of the club, of course. And with his wife and mates. So there's a whole mix of people in there. Long-term supporters, fairly short-term supporters. But the long-term aim and the common goal between us is literally, if you want to come and join us, be prepared to lend your voice to the common good of Reading Football Club.
Yeah, the thing that I think about that Huddersfield one is I remember going to Huddersfield a few years ago in the FA Cup when we played them. I can't remember, this must be 2015, and we drew 2-2. And that was a case of I looked across at.
That was the season after the semi-finals.
Ah, yeah, 2016. Yeah, so we went up there. I knew you'd know that. We went up there, and I looked across, and I remember. I think probably looks at it, and I think they had a few flags and banners up. It was in its infancy. Wasn't a very popular game to go to, and I kind of thought, that's a bit silly. But you look at it now, and it's very impressive, and it's the same at Crystal Palace is another example. I think we got a message from the Tilehurst End a few days ago. I saw it on Twitter at least, saying it started out with just a group of lads just wanted to start singing, and that bottom corner now, I think it's the Holmesdale Road end. Someone's probably going to tell me it's not.
Yeah, Holmesdale Road end. Yeah, Holmesdale Fanatics. They've got pretty much the whole of the bottom tier. Do you know, I can remember when that first started, actually. It wasn't long before it was 2008-9, and we went there for a 0-0 draw. I remember thinking at the time that, being, should we say, not very impressionable, I did wonder what was going on. But I've grown to kind of, and looked at it with a little bit of disdain, but as you grow, as you mature and you age a little bit, you kind of do just think, fair play to them. They've now got pretty much a whole movement behind that goal. And again, the whole ultra scene might not necessarily be many people's cup of tea. And let me hasten to add that we're not looking necessarily to be Reading Football Club ultras. Literally, all we want to do is just chant positively and get behind the club and just give people that area to go. But the Holmesdale Fanatics, they do exceptionally well every single game. There's a great atmosphere. You go to Selhurst Park these days. There's a great atmosphere there. Win, lose or draw, that end will get behind their side. And the same goes for Huddersfield. And you have to say that, yes, positive results will help. Huddersfield evidently and obviously get sellout crowds every week at the moment. But it was, they were getting reasonable numbers in that end, for bog standard league games when they weren't doing particularly well. You've got to remember before last season, they were perennially in the bottom half of the championship, but they got decent numbers. The atmosphere was better than it was, before they started out. The chap Potter, I think his name is, started out that movement. So, a fair play to them. But hopefully, we'll get some good feedback from hopefully the Cowshed Loyal and go from there and see what we need to do.
I was actually at the same game with the 0-0 draw at Palace, and I did Selhurst Park isn't a naturally brilliant place for an atmosphere. It's a bit of a hodgepodge kind of ground, but they've done fantastically well. It's now one of the best atmospheres in the country. Final point I want to say on this is that Matthew Everson had a tweet into us on the mailbag that I just want to raise now, and it is a good point to raise. I think he says, why do fans need to find a need to say something negative about Y25-26, the East Stand sort of current, as you would say, chanting section at the stadium, when they're talking about the South Stand? I think the thing is with the Y25-26 is that it's just not everyone's cup of tea. It's not my personal cup of tea. It's not where I sit. The emphasis of the South Stand is kind of, as Matthew says in his tweet, it is focusing on the team. And I think it's kind of just the negatives that people say about Y25-26 is just to kind of justify the need to get something going. And it's kind of built behind this belief, in my opinion, that we actually can get something on the level of Palace and Huddersfield going. I don't know what you would say about that, Dave.
Well, my season ticket is at the top of Y25, and I actually sit near Matthew Everson. So, I kind of get exactly what he's saying, but at the same time, when the atmosphere, when we initially discussed the, with the club starting out of the of this whole, what is now turning out to be a project, you have to recognise that Y24, 25, 26 was traditionally the atmospheric area, but for years hadn't done its job. So it's very, very difficult to not actually say anything about Y25, 26, the natural singing, chanting area, without appearing to be negative. So, and like you say, it's not everybody's cup of tea either. And it's grown. One of the reasons why we won't ever call the whole South Stand movement now anything to do with the South Bank is because the South Stand was a bit of a catch-all. It was a pro-Reading, anti-opposition area. I stood in the South Bank on a number of occasions. I'm old enough to remember it. I kind of like to think that I served my apprenticeship on the South Bank, as it were, my Reading supporting apprenticeship. And so I get exactly what it was about. So the South Stand will never be We'll never be that because we're not interested really in the interaction with the opposition supporters. We're more interested in positively getting behind the players and making sure that they know that they've got an area of the stand that is that is going to be positive. So, but when a movement starts out of what I perceive to be apathy from the main atmospheric area, like I say, it's very difficult to not be negative, not appear to be, and not actually say anything that won't appear to be negative and not constructive. Now, what I'd say to that is, now evidently since Jaap Stam has left, the atmosphere has been better, and the atmosphere was decent on Saturday. Now, obviously, between the South Stand and the East Stand on Saturday, we had 1,400 Sunderland fans who were fairly raucous. They'd obviously been on the ale. And Sunderland fans aren't exactly known for being quiet. They don't have the Roker roar for nothing. But from my perspective, it was difficult to hear the East Stand. And what I'd like, ultimately, the goal is to have some kind of coordination, shall we say, and feeding off the rest of the ground. We're not looking to be the chant leaders, as it were. We don't want to necessarily be that. But if it's quiet, we're gonna chant our own thing. But if there's something else going on around the ground that we can get involved with, then by all means we'll absolutely join in with that and create a ring of noise, hopefully, rather than 2-3 different chants all at once.
If anyone listening to this wants to get involved in it, wants to find out more about it, obviously you can get in touch via the Tilehurst end. You can get in touch with Dave on Twitter. There's the Club 1871 Twitter that's been set up, as Dave mentioned. Plenty of avenues to get involved in. Don't hesitate to email us or whatever. We'll always put you into the right people if you want to get involved. And if you have any ideas, of course, we're always happy to discuss them on the show and pass them on to the relevant people. And I think we'll leave that there then, and we'll head on to Newsbites now and talk about what's been going on around the club.
The Tilehurst End Podcast. Read the blog on thetilehurstend.com.
So a couple of things to mop up then, Dave. The under-18s faced Brighton on Saturday, 11th in the table, having lost 4-1 at Aston Villa on the weekend. Not quite going too well for them. The women, however, everything's going absolutely perfect for the women. They are currently up to third in the Women's Super League 1 table, 4 wins from 5. They've not lost since early January, and their final home game is on May the 12th at the Madstad versus Liverpool. It's nice to continue to have something to talk about, isn't it, with the women? They're away to Arsenal Wednesday night, and it's nice. I think it actually gives the club a kind of more rounded public opinion, because you've seen how the plans for the Man United women's team have come, and a lot of people are sort of back to that, and that's looking good. Reading being a successful women's team, perhaps maybe even getting into Europe and all that sort of stuff, certainly bodes well for how the men's team is kind of looked at as well, I think. Absolutely,
and I think it's helped with the publicity that it gets off the BBC now, with games being televised on the red button. No, absolutely fair play to them. They've clearly done extremely well. It's a little bit awkward for me to get down to games living over, whisper it quietly, Swindon way now, given they play in Wickham. But I do know that simply, once the rugby club leave at the end of, hopefully before the end of their contract, but certainly at the end of their contract, then they'll be looking at getting the women playing at the Medeski on a permanent basis. But no, fair play to them. Third is a phenomenal effort, given the resources. Certainly at the top end, you look at Manchester City, and obviously I noticed Reading actually did beat Man City the other week, didn't they? In Manchester. So you look at the clubs like Manchester City are obviously pumping in the resources for them. It's fair play to them for getting to where they are.
It's interesting that, as I say, the under-18's not doing so well. They're 11th of the top sort of under-18 Premier League division. The under-23s, they're 5th in the Premier League 2nd division. The top 5 go into the promotion playoffs. They are playing kind of as we speak at the moment. They're 4-1 down at home to Newcastle. So then they've got a final game. I think they play Villa. They play Stoke in their final game to round off their season. Which, are you worried at all that the sort of subsidiary teams, the under-23s and under-18s, do look to be underperforming at the moment?
Not necessarily. I mean, you look. you do sometimes get sides that have got an individually outstanding talent. Ultimately you got to look at the fact that there are not many players out of a group, on a year by year group, who actually make it as a fully fledged professional. And even that supposed golden year when was it the under 21s or under 23s? They played Fulham in the FA Youth Cup final, was it?
Yeah.
Semi-final, sorry. You look at some of those players have gone on to forge what are now becoming quite established Football League careers. And it would have been nice to have had those players develop at Reading certainly better to become more established first teamers. I still to this day don't believe some of them were given anywhere near enough of a chance to prove that they could improve. But ultimately, I'm not overly concerned, provided that perhaps you have one, maybe two players who are going to make the step up to what at the moment is Championship football. If we ever end up being promoted and establishing ourselves in the Premier League, it's only going to get harder. Perhaps it'll be a little bit easier if we end up being relegated. But yeah, certainly at a Championship level club, we've done well. We have a number of youth players that are across the divisions. Lawson Daft, Jack Stacey, naming two off the top of my head.
Angus MacDonald, currently in the Championship as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And Michael Antonio as well. Could we count him as a youth player?
Oh, I do.
But ultimately, the brutal reality of it is distinctly possible that all 22 of those players will not make it, but as a fully fledged pro at Reading or perhaps in Leagues 1 and 2. That's just the way it is. So I'm not overly concerned. Obviously, we want to be the best we possibly can. But if in a year group you don't have a player that's good enough for all your manpower and your outlay on them over the years, that's just the way it is, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, we have Danny Loader and Jack Nolan, who are both sort of involved in the England academy teams, which I think gives enough of an incentive. I mean, Danny Loader's not going to leave Reading because the Reading under-18 team aren't doing very well. That's not going to happen. It will be because of the first team and all that sort of stuff, and massive bids from other clubs. The thing is, it is very interesting that you mentioned the sort of 2012 and the team after that became very good, and the one from about 2015, I think it was, that did very well as well, because I was actually on Saturday for personal reasons. I'm not going to go into too much for here, but I was at Maidenhead watching them play Dover, and on the Maidenhead bench was Nana Owusu, who was the left back of that great team in the academy sense that won with Aaron Cool and with Jack Stacey, who have mixed fortunes themselves. And it's hard for an individual player, isn't it, when you're part of a team that is good, even at under 23 level. That doesn't guarantee anything, because when it becomes you on your own, you get moved out, you get released and you get picked up by a decent National League club. You find yourself on their bench and hang on a second, my career isn't going anywhere, sort of thing. So we have to bear it in mind. We have to just bide our time, and whatever individuals do come up, we kind of have to take them up from the under-18s as quickly as possible, make them a senior player, and hopefully that's what we're capable of doing. Hopefully that's what we'll see doing, and that's certainly we'll keep an eye on the Tilehurst end. We'll move on then. And move on to the mailbag and answer some of your questions from the weekend games.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.
Few questions then from the mailbag, Dave. A lot of them asking what's gone wrong and what can go right in the future. Funnily enough, there's a lot's gone wrong, but Michael Hall has asked for the top 5 reasons last season versus this season are a universe apart. We'll come to the top 5 collectively, I think. Michael's thrown in a couple here, so we'll review those afterwards. He said the coach Stephen Reid leaving after the pre-season tour, possession, the being found out, what he calls pointless football, Stan being a top coach but a poor manager, Al Habsi and Jan had seasons of their life last season, not so great this season, and Danny Williams is another one that he says is obviously someone we've lost. I would throw in a couple. I'd probably say that we've got substantially less lucky this season in terms of games. I would also say that the quality level of the Championship has risen as well quite substantially this season.
I couldn't disagree with that. I think there's you could argue the case for each one of those points. I think for me the biggest reason or the biggest difference is simply we haven't improved. Last season, and I'm a big one for looking at performance stats, performance data. Now we went whole games virtually last season without creating a genuine goal scoring opportunity, and yet we may well have gone and won that. Take Leeds for example. I think there were a couple of chances in the second half, but the first half, that there wasn't a genuine goal scoring chance from memory. Kermagant's goal was a snapshot from the edge of the area that simply beats Rob Green for pace. So we had a number of those types of games. Simply, the long and short of it is that if you perform the manner in which we did last season and you're getting results, those results are not going to be sustained. So it was a genuine lack of improvement. I actually thought that the signings that we made in the summer, certainly in the wide areas, were going to improve us. We'd start creating more chances. And there's no question that Mo Barrow has been an absolute revelation this season on one side. It's a crying shame that we didn't have Gareth McCleary, I think, on the right-hand side, a fit Gareth McCleary, because quite frankly, McCleary is streets ahead of anything that Sean Yaluko cannot, or has offered this season, shall we say. I think he's a far more effective player. And it's a shame. I've also seen today an alleged, and I emphasise the word alleged, photograph today of Adi Popper apparently chain smoking in a bar in Saudi Arabia, or certainly one of the outlying countries, where perhaps you might be able to get a drink. And that might explain the issue with Adi Popper. But at the same time, whenever I saw Adi Popper on a football pitch, he offered much more of a goal scoring threat than Sean Yaluko. Certainly looked capable of creating a chance sooner and more regularly. So, but ultimately, the long and short of it is we haven't improved. We haven't improved in any way, shape, or form, and the results were never going to be maintained.
Do you give Yaluko another season? We have a couple of questions that I'm going to combine into one here. Paul Dawson asked, with so many underachieving, is it time to build a new team? But who should we keep and why? And Alex Everson also asked, you can make 3 positional signings in the summer. What 3 positions do you prioritise? What 3 positions do you really want to change? And obviously the attack has to be one of them. But I mean, I would have to say that the striker is still more important than Yaluko's position. There are probably only about, if we're allowed to make the wholesale changes that we want, there's probably only about 5 or 6 players I'd definitely keep. You're talking Moore, Richards, Manone, Swift is probably still worth keeping hold of unless you get a big bid for him. There's Obita. I'm struggling to find players that I would absolutely definitely keep at all costs. And as Paul Dawson says, so many are underachieving. What wholesale change would you want to make?
Well, the first question, are they actually underachieving? That's open to conjecture. I mean, if I'm going to answer Alex's question, the 3 positional signings, I think we've got to have a defence. If we're going to separate up the individual positions, shall we say? So say you're going to take a midfield, you're going to have your defensive midfielder, you're going to have your attacking midfielder. Absolutely, you take a defensive midfielder or 2. I'm not convinced Joey van den Berg is a long. Well, I say I'm not convinced. He's absolutely not going to be the long-term solution to that position. George Evans appears to be out of favour under Clement. I'm not entirely sure why, but having said that, he's not exactly what you call a combative all-action midfielder. George Evans is much more cultured. Strikes me as a bit more of a Michael Carrick type player rather than someone who is almost like a deep lying water carrier, not like John Swift was supposed to be playing on Saturday. So certainly a combative defensive midfielder. The Danny Williams effect this season has been sorely missed. So I absolutely, a goal-scoring striker, someone who is capable of scoring 20 goals a season. You absolutely have to have that. It's Jan Kermorgant had the season of his life last season. That helped. Some of those goals that he scored, they weren't even chances. The winner at Bristol City wasn't a chance. Like I said earlier, the Leeds United goal wasn't a chance. A genuine, you'd expect him to score chance. It was a chance to get a snapshot on goal, and the keeper got hands to it. Stronger palms, it stays out.
Cardiff at home, another one free kick, edge of the area.
Yeah, exactly. So the list goes on. So yeah, absolutely, someone who is actually going to be in and around the box more often than not. And it all depends on exactly what position formation Paul Clement would like to play as well. I mean, if he wants to play two up front, then we need a fox in the box striker. I think we've got a perfectly adequate foil for that in John Daddy Budvarsson. Remains to be seen what is it Danny Loader, how he develops. He could be the answer coming in from the academy. But yeah, absolutely a fox in the box striker, almost an Adam Lafondra type striker.
His name was the one that came to my mind when you said fox in the box then.
Yeah, or Jamie Curitan. I mean, that's the one thing that this club's always, generally always had up until about sort of 5 or 6 years ago, consistently was always had a good striker over the last 30 to 40 years. You go back to Robin Friday, Kerry Dixon, Trevor Senior, Jimmy Quinn, Trevor Morley, Butler, Curitan, Forster, Kitson, Doyle, Long. They all, even put Lafondra as capable of putting. I wouldn't put him in the same level as some of those players that I mentioned, but certainly he's up there. He can be mentioned in the same breath, as it were, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So we've generally had good strikers, and that's something that we've missed, we've lacked over the last few years. Is someone who can put the ball away, 20 times, in a single 46 game season, and maintain fitness at the same time.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think a striker would have to be one of my three positions. I think I would leave the defence alone if we're talking about prioritising. I think the way Clement has got the defence playing almost makes it okay to just sort of continue with the, a Laurie Moore, McShane and perhaps Tom Holmes as your fourth centre back seems reasonable. I feel I agree on the defensive mid, but I think a central midfielder. The problem is that you want an attacking central midfielder, but logic dictates that you stick it out with John Swift, Liam Kelly, Dave Edwards, who all have the potential to offer something. But I mean, I'm just not seeing it at the moment. Maybe I'll have to go with a central midfielder, maybe a winger, because I'm not convinced Gary Cleary will do it this season.
Struggled for fitness this season, and when the second half of last season he didn't seem fit, and his performance in the playoff final was very lacklustre, I thought. Swift maintains fitness. I think we have a real asset on our hands, and we had a brief cameo almost of fitness in the match against Forest when he played really well. It's just that over the last 18 months or year or so, to nearly 18 months, I suppose you could say, he's been underwhelming to say the least. But it's mainly down to the fact that it's been a bit stop-start with his fitness. I think if he's able to maintain his fitness, then yeah, we have a real asset on our hands. And I don't think we necessarily have the reason to go out and shell out on a good attacking midfielder.
Yeah, well, I think with John Swift and almost any creative player, give him a run of 10 games at the start of next season. 10 starts consistently, see how he operates over. Then if he gets to January and it's not working out, then you've got to think about it. But you are quite right in saying that he's not been fit, and Swift has been talking about that in the media. Moving on, Matthew Everson talks about another central midfielder. He says, is Liam Kelly playing anywhere near his potential? With a more competitive centre midfielder squad really getting the team, he would replace the whole central midfield, Edwards, Kelly and Swift, all been very poor all season. We talked about Edwards, we talked about Swift, so we'll talk about Kelly. I ran out of patience with Liam Kelly at Fulham, because there was a couple of times when he got into a forward position. There was one time he just fell over, kind of like I think he did against Preston when he went down in the box. There was a time when Leandro Bacuna was free on the right-hand side for a lovely ball over the top, the exact sort of one that I know that Liam Kelly can play. He turned around and played it to his centre-back instead. That isn't what I go to football to watch. The question, is Liam Kelly playing anywhere near his potential? I think he probably is playing near his potential. The question is, how high is that potential? I think we're probably, after 2 seasons of him being in the team, without any real injury or anything to hamper him, I think we're kind of finding out now that, for me, very good technique, not a great footballing brain.
I think that's a little harsh. I think that is a little harsh. I think Liam Kelly. Look, you can't really, as a supporter, look into the mind of a player with any degree of genuine, not accuracy, but knowledge.
I think it's more like decision making and those sort of things. Those are the things we get to see.
Kelly is lacking. When I've seen him play this season, he lacks the confidence to give the creative midfielder ball a go at times, and those kind of passes that you're talking about. And I admit I haven't seen them, haven't seen the incidents, but they sound like they are the sort of creative midfielder balls that you'd expect someone like Swifty to play with a decent degree of accuracy. And Kelly's in there to kind of do that in some ways. Let's face it, he's not in there for his combative ability, is it? There's only one reason he's in there for, and that's his all-round, his technique. I think there's a little bit of confidence issue going on there. Like I say, I'm not talking with any degree of authority on this. So there's only Clement and genuinely Kelly who really know what's going on in his head.
Yeah.
But like you, I'd like to see when the opportunity arises, the quick ball. I do wonder if Kelly is. You've got to remember, up until Clement, his first team football has consisted of his genuine first team football at this level has consisted of Yap Stam football, which is very much very, very conservative. And I just wonder if it's worth. Well, it certainly is worth, in my mind, giving Kelly the benefit of the doubt, given that knowledge, and allowing him the time to develop into a more attack-minded player, and more attack, less conservatism. I'm not sure Clement's necessarily going to be the man to do that. We've been there already this evening, but certainly I think. It's ultimately football's about taking risks, and Yapstam always used to say that it's about taking risks at the right time and in the right place. And I just wonder if Stam has drummed that kind of element into Kelly, and Kelly feels that he doesn't feel that the risk is worth taking at that particular time. Like I say, only Liam Kelly really knows what's going on in his head, but that's my take on it. I believe the ability is absolutely there. It really is. It's just, for me, I just think, the conservative nature of the structured nature of Yapstam's play has perhaps embedded itself probably a bit too deeply in Liam Kelly at the moment, and it needs more creativity, it needs teasing out.
Well, ultimately, I think we are going to find out with Liam Kelly, because I can't see, unless someone who kind of, as you say, has that ability to pull the creativeness out of him, is going to come and sign him. He's going to be in the team next season. He's going to be in and around the squad, at least I should imagine. So we will get to find out what happens with Liam Kelly. It won't be we should get some closure on his footballing development as he stays at Reading. I can't see him going anywhere else anytime soon. And we'll just have to wait and see. I think his decision making has been lacking. Is that experience? Is that conservatism? We'll get to find out, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye on it on the Tilehurst then. Final question from the mailbag then. Tom asks, when is it appropriate to make Liam Moore captain? We currently have Paul McShane is the leader, club captain technically. Then we have Chris Guns, who I think usually takes the armband after that. Both of those players probably going to be at the club next season. I'm not sure Paul McShane's contract situation exactly, but Liam Moore, I certainly don't see anyone better to stand up when the opportunity arises.
When is it appropriate? Well, it's only appropriate to make him captain when the current club captain leaves, or if the current club captain does something that renders it almost impossible for him to continue in that position. That's when it's appropriate, quite frankly. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly when his contract ends. He signed a 3-year contract in 2015, wasn't it? So
he has got another year.
So he's going to be here next season. Nobody's going to buy him. Let's face it. So we're certainly not going to pay him the amount of money that we're probably paying him. He's getting to the bless him. He's getting to the back end of his career now. Paul McShane. Chris Gunter is a highly, highly respected member of the squad, and for me has improved immeasurably on the Chris Gunter that we received when McDermott signed him. He has his flaws, of course, but as you say, he's a very very highly respected member of the squad, and he's going to carries an air of authority that an international player of 90 odd caps now, nearly 100 caps, should do. Doesn't matter which international nation that is. If you're good enough to play for your country and you do it regularly, and you've done it regularly, in amongst playing a 46-game championship season for all but one of your playing career, then you're going to garner a hell of a lot of credit. So, when McShane finally leaves, that's when I would probably make Liam Moore captain if Liam Moore is still at the club.
Well, that is the thing, isn't it? Liam Moore. Let's say it's 2019, the summer of 2019, we're still in the Championship. Liam Moore gets offered a move to Stoke or West Ham or whoever are in the Premier League. We're not going to be able to turn around and say, if we make you club captain, you'll stay. That won't work.
No, exactly. He's going to be looking after his career, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
And basically going to be trying to make he's a footballer. He's a professional footballer. He's going to be trying to make as much money as he possibly can. So, and where's the money? It's in the Premier League. Stoke or West Ham still in the Premier League. They put in an offer that the club finds suitable. He's going to be off. Let's face it. It's as simple as that, unfortunately.
And that's the thing that I think will stop him probably eventually being club captain, unless, of course, Reading get in the Premier League themselves. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's not get onto such realms in this particular podcast. We'll move on then to the final end of the show, and we'll be talking any other business about playing Sheffield Wednesday up at Hillsborough.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
Any other business?
So we've lost 4 on the bounce away from home, but Sheffield Wednesday have only won 1 of their last 5 at home. Where's this one going to end then, Dave? Who's going to give? Are we going to finally get something away from home, or Sheffield Wednesday going to revert to being the dangerous Hillsborough outfit that I think they've probably been for a good few years now?
You see, I think their manager, he's got the reputation of being very conservative in Germany. I spoke to a couple of German supporters about him when I was over there 4 weeks ago. And yeah, he's got a reputation of being rather structured and defensive, but he gets teams up from Bundesliga 2. He's got that reputation. So, and given, the respective reputations, I think, certainly under Paul Clement, yeah, we've sat back, certainly away from home from what I've read and what I've seen, we sit back. It's got draw written all over it for me. It'll be enough for me. I'll be happy with that. I'll take a draw given the quality that they possess, regardless of how they of how they set up. So this is probably going 0-0 for me, I think.
Yeah, well, general improvement of late for Sheffield Wednesday. They've won 4 of their last 6. Top scorer Gary Hooper is still their top scorer, despite the fact he's been out since December. They've had Fernando Fiorstieri back in the team. He scored 2 goals in 5 games. But, I mean, let's talk predictions then. I've gone 1-1, sorry for this one. I've gone 1-1. I don't see this being a high scoring game, pretty much for the reasons you've just said. I don't think either team is necessarily capable of demolishing another team. And I mean, we've lost 4 on the bounce away from home. I've got more optimism than thinking that we'll just get every single game away from home between now and the end of the season. We've got something in us to go and at least score there, and I think if we score, then we'll have something to protect.
Absolutely, yeah. That's just it, though, getting the first goal. We haven't got the first goal away from home yet under Paul Clement. Things might change. But at the same time, yeah, I'm going 0-0.
Well, we haven't scored away from home under Paul Clement, as far as my memory serves. That's we haven't, have we? That's 3-0, 1-0, and that's it. So obviously only 2 games. But so prediction league, you're going 0-0. Is that officially on the record?
That's officially on the record, yeah.
That's good, because I must say you are at the bottom of the prediction league at the moment. You optimistically texted me the other day saying that you've got quite a few scores correct, and or quite a few results rather. You're actually on a run of about 6 win, draw or loss in a row, but everyone else has been picking up the odd result as well. I got 1-0 at Fulham, for example, so you're bottom on 19 points, I'm on 21. Johnny's on 24 with Wim just behind him on 23. Wim was the only person who said, or was one of the only people who said, a draw for the Sunderland game, so Wim's on 23. Then Alan West absolutely plucked 2-2 for the Sunderland game. So he is now level on points with Tom Crocker at the top of the leaderboard on 27 points. I mean, he said he had a premonition for 2-2. I'm not sure if he's gone down the bookies and spoken to someone who has a bit of an insider knowledge on the dressing room.
Yeah, absolutely. It's looking like we're going to have our own helicopter Sunday, isn't it? Given the last day of the season, if it stays like that, I'll deliver quite happily, hand deliver the trophy into the helicopter. I'm going no. My defence of this particular crown has been absolutely horrific. Let's be brutally honest. Yeah, probably far too positive.
We've actually, only Johnny's been the most pessimistic. I've kind of collated all of the scores and worked out what the team would have if everyone's predictions were correct. Johnny has Reading on 41 points. We're on 43 at the moment, so Johnny's method of late has been loss. And to be honest, since Stam has gone, we've actually all been very decent at predicting these results. We've all gained probably the majority of our points in the last 6 or 7 weeks. Tom actually being top of the leaderboard, he's been most optimistic. 65 points he reckons Reading would have got from his predictions over the season. 10th in the league, that would have put us, were it correct, we're on 43. So
has he paid you anything?
No.
How does that work?
I think
it's be optimistic season and still be top of the bleeding leaderboard on this prediction competition. That don't stack up. I think there needs to be a Shewards inquiry here.
Because he's been awful lately. It was at the start of the season when we weren't actually that bad. The odd win at home to Forest and Barnsley and all those. I think he got quite a few of those nailed on perfectly, and the rest have just fallen by the wayside.
Oh, yeah, luck.
I'll post everything, the full leaderboard and everything as it ends for a couple of weeks. Obviously only a couple of weeks away from it ending now, so my chances of hauling over a 6-point gap with only 9 left to play for are pretty stinky, I must say myself. So we'll see how that goes. We'll go Sheffield Wednesday then on Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff as per normal, and you can keep an eye on the Tilehurst end for everything that goes on and all the goals and whatnot that go in, reports and ratings as per usual. So that then does it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on, Dave, and talking all things Reading.
No problem at all. Pleasure, always.
And as I said at the top of the show, we won't necessarily be back at the early part of the week after Sheffield Wednesday. There's a high chance that Ollie won't be able to do the podcast extra while I'm away, so your Sheffield Wednesday analysis will have to be in podcast extra next week at some point, and I'll be back, I guess, in a fortnight or so, where we'll be talking the Ipswich game and the Sheffield Wednesday game and everything else in between. So thank you for joining us for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next show, and all through the season. We're almost there now. The season is almost over. Which division Reading will be in next season, it's almost worked out, but we need a couple more wins, certainly a couple more points on the board to determine exactly where we'll be. In the meantime, come on your arse.
It's very